One of the things that's been really interesting to me as you and I have gotten to know each other is that you went down the path of being an environmental science person. You had studied that in school. And I think most people, when they imagine somebody in environmental science, you must have been an outlier to come from a farm with 250,000 chickens laying eggs.
Oh yeah, that was definitely like on campus. At first I would kind of stay quiet about like my agricultural background, because I had a lot of, classmates that were either vegans or vegetarians. And at that time, I didn't know how to have like positive, just conversations to like understand their standpoint and for them to hear my standpoint. And then I definitely remember like it was my junior year and someone said something and my hand went straight up and the whole class was shocked because is at a small environmental school, that was the same size as my high school that I went to, then that includes like from freshman year to PhD students. So I had been with a small core group of people for years and they didn't know I had an ag background. And it was about chicken manure. We were talking about manure storage, CAFOs and different things like that. And I was able to actually say like, this is why we are environmentally friendly. This is why we care about the land. This is why we care about clean water. Our animals need clean water, just like you and I need clean water. You don't want to drink dirty water. I don't want them drinking dirty water. We have a wastewater treatment plant on site where we treat all of our egg wash water. We could have had a lagoon and then let those things settle out. And then the water off the top would be, let out eventually. But we didn't want a lagoon. Those are stinky. They're not, they don't make good neighbors. And, a lot of people say not in my backyard. So we have a wastewater treatment plant that allows us to clean the water. We could use it to like wash our trucks or different things if we wanted to like reduce, reuse, recycle. So with my ag background, meeting my environmental background, and you've talked about it before too, like with sustainability, like it's a fun word, but like, what does it actually mean? Like if you're just checking a box or writing a plan. And I think that with the regulations and the things that we deal with on a regular basis, it's just harder to keep, like now we have regenerative ag and all these different things. And we're all trying to do the same thing, feed the world. And I think that if we all understood each other a little bit more, instead of trying to divide each other or say like my product's better, like I don't have free range eggs, but I will gladly tell you where to find them if that's what you prefer to buy. But if you want to buy our eggs, I can tell you a list of stores locally. Or if you're looking, we get a lot of calls for quail eggs. Like that's one thing that's monthly. Someone's calling for quail or duck eggs. That really changed throughout COVID. And I think people are just becoming more aware of where their food comes from and those processes. But it's just, I don't know, like I want to be part of the conversation and sometimes it's knowing when to step up and sometimes it's knowing when to shut up. But I think that we'll have to be better advocates for ourselves going forward. We can't just sit back and let someone else say, this is how it's done, because if they're not hearing the correct information on how it's done, your story will be told negatively.
Yeah, and like I think that one of the reasons that a young person in college can be so caught up in the aughts is those are the easiest stories to understand, right? They're the easiest one for somebody to come along and say, this is the way you think reality is, but I'm going to show you where the conflict of that reality actually runs into some other challenge, and let me show you how dark it is. And by you knowing and believing this other thing, you're a part of a special group. You're a part of a group of people that holds a special truth. So take that truth and move it out into the world. And the challenge that ag runs into is if you are the traditional and the mainstream, your conflict stories are things you have already overcome, right? There were times when eggs weren't candled, or there were times when you didn't know how to wash things, or you didn't have certain protocols that you as a farmer implement now because you just didn't know, or you just weren't doing things on the scale that they're at. But those stories are really hard to make compelling to a young person that thinks the way that I'll make the biggest difference in the world, the way that I'll transcend my luxury position, is that I'll fight for some future, but they genuinely don't know what's going on in the wider world. They're just trying their best to advocate for something they believe that's bigger than themselves.
Yeah. And so like I could produce cage-free eggs, but I need a market and a customer that's willing to pay top dollar for those added costs behind the scenes. Like we could do it. We could build the barns. We could hire the extra employees and you know, but at the grocery store, when you're making that choice between a dozen eggs that's $4, maybe even $8, or $1.50, which dozen will you ultimately buy at the end of the day?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I run into a problem because I know what stories are sticky, right? Like, I know just from practice, just from being around it. So my wife and I, when I was telling her about free-range eggs one time, I remember citing that, you know, they're open to predator birds that can fly around, and you've got these chickens that have been bred for many, many years. They're totally defenseless, and now they're being hauled off by eagles that are coming down. And so to my wife, she's like, oh my God, I don't want to support, you know, chickens that are being hauled off by eagles. Like, this is terrible, right? So now she wants to buy the cheaper eggs. But then if I actually like take a step back and say, well, there are benefits and there are reasons to doing this and there are reasons for doing that, but that's not the way our human mind works. The way we work is we need a story that gives meaning to the decisions that we're making. And I find your quest to be able to explain things to legislatures and like always calling people up and working with these different groups to be one that I am really interested in helping out with, because you have a tall hill to climb, because unless you want to shoot at the other side, it is very difficult to make sticky stories.
And we've actually found a unique ally throughout this whole process and in building relationships with urban legislators. And that's with the live markets down in New York City. There's some legislation to ban those live markets. And there are so many
Wait, what are live markets? Like, there are places where you can bring your chickens and just be like hanging out.
So yeah, you would be able to go buy like a live chicken, a live animal, and you would butcher it yourself, maybe for your religious practices or different things, your cultural background. And so having access to these live markets is a real big deal down in New York City. And so these urban legislators are like, whoa, 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 you can't do this. And it's like, now you understand our side. Like, they're calling New York Farm Bureau and saying, like, how can I help my constituents with this issue? And so now, you know, we're building those relationships, and we'll say, we'll help you with the live markets, but you've got to help us with labor or cage free, or, you know, get the word out that farm workers are essential and they need these COVID vaccines. So they're starting to understand a little bit more of how or where their food comes from. And it's an opportunity. And so to keep nurturing these relationships.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing, right? Like, in our culture, I remember one time a farmer up in either South Dakota or Minnesota saying there's this huge Muslim population around St. Paul, Minneapolis. And around the springtime, they have a tradition of slaughtering a goat. Well, like, they've got to go find a place that is willing to raise goats for them and then be able to slaughter it and handle all the entrails and the blood and doing it in their own halal way. and that like you find two different, completely different theologies, right? Christians and Muslims bonding together over, we need to be able to have the freedom to do this. We need to be able to have the markets where we can come in and share. And it's funny because those are two groups of somewhere people that are separated by entire religions, but it's the anywhere people, the people that are living in the city that say, well, you know, safety first, or, oh, you know, you shouldn't have these traditions and therefore we shouldn't have it. And so it does make for strange bedfellows.
Yeah, definitely. But it's great to be able to have these conversations that, you know, helps everyone with their, you know, the same goals.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.